everyone. Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And today we are off to the Scandinavian nation of Norway, where longhouses suggest powerful rulers existed in Norway long before the Viking Age and long, long before Norway was Norway. We love the Nords. We love the North.
Yeah, yeah. So here in Sem in Eastern Norway where they're digging, they've uncovered a absolutely massive longhouse from the third century. So this is 1800 years old. This is when Rome was at the height of its power. That's how old this was. We don't hear about the Vikings or Norway or anything really for another 9 centuries after this longhouse was built. And it is ridiculously large. It's I believe they said it was 16 meters wide, which is as wide as two houses pushed together. So it's a mansion.
They quite literally say it would have accommodated at least two of the neighboring houses that stand there today.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting too because the Longhouse was a very fundamental piece of culture for the Vikings and for the Nordmen. So it's a very interesting connection here, and you see it transpire. But also, what a phenomenal feat of construction and engineering! I mean, 1800 years ago, we had actual stone buildings, we had stone construction, but this far north in this region also adds a layer of a lot of uniqueness, honestly. Um,
Oh, yeah. It's so big that they actually don't know how big it is because it runs through a road which they could not tear up to look at and into another field which they did not have permission to dig on. So this thing goes on.
wow.
It's Yeah, it's massive and it actually surpasses in size the longhouse at the wealthiest known site uh, for that time period. There's a place in Goodmay, Denmark that has more gold than anywhere else in the early Iron Age. And it's not nearly as big as what we see at Sem in Norway, meaning that the folk in Sem were building bigger than the richest people in Northern Europe.
Which I find it fascinating because the nation of Norway did not exist in the 200s, but this article so kindly mentions that it was formed in 872. So this was 600 years before the contemporary nation of Norway as we know it.
Yep.
That is unreal. I mean, it what when did the Roman Empire officially die? Was it the three four
It
hundreds?
it the Roman Empire collapsed under Emperor Romulus in the 5th century.
Okay, 500.
Uh,
Or no, that was
so no,
400s,
four
isn't it?
that'd be 400s.
Oh,
That'd be
I
in the
had it right the
400s.
first time. Hell
Yeah, that'd
yeah.
be in the 400s. Yeah, and this is from the 3rd century. So this is 200s. Rome is at the height of its power, undergoing a civil war and massive crisis. Um, and these people here in Norway and Sweden are building literal monuments.
It's just interesting too because we don't really have that much information or knowledge about what the third century Norwegians were, who they were they small kingdoms, what did they call themselves, were there chieftains over an area, were there kings, did
Yeah,
the common idea that most scientists accept at the moment were that there were petty kings with power over a fjord or a smaller area, and
yeah,
the size of this and the scale just it makes you think that this king probably had a lot more power or a lot more influence given the wealth.
yeah. This definitely goes against the belief that Scandinavia is highly disorganized and fractured during this time period. Building something like this is in generally indicative of a stable, wealthy society with a large population. And in order to do that, especially in a place that's not really known for abundant food resources like Norway and Sweden, you have to control a large swath of territory.
And it's interesting to me because one of the ways they were able to identify the size and scale of the site is by looking at post holes. What people may not know or realize is a lot of times in soil like that, if there was a wooden post there at some point and it had decayed, it actually stains the soil in that area and changes it to a darker color. But you may not notice until you open a wide swath and you see a couple of just, circular holes of different shade dirt all throughout. And what they really did here was they marked out every single one of them, and you start noticing that they were spaced pretty evenly apart and that they had commonalities, and you can pretty reasonably assume, because humans use the same building styles across the world, that these were post holes to hold up a roof. And given the number, the size, and the width of them, it was pretty large. It just shows a level of centralization of power that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and that's that's something that a lot of people don't really come across when, especially when they think of or expect to find a fractured society, because let's be honest, um, these early Nordic peoples did not really have too much of a preserved written history to bring to us. We really start getting accounts of them from other people, from Greeks and Byzantines who venture into these lands, or from Englishmen who escape it.
And what's also interesting too is what they ended up discovering is that there was other evidence too to show that Sem and Huxand, a nearby village, were centers of power for a long time. And part of the reason they say that is because there was a large gold hoard, a gold treasure, the largest treasure in Nordic history, came at Hohen Farms, just a few kilometers from Sem. And archaeologists also ended up uncovering a silver treasure, 20 graves, and 13 Viking Age artifacts from farms nearby. So it shows that at least during the Viking era, there was a lot of power centralization here. And then even in the 1350s, there was a large farmhouse that was there. And then in 1602, the king, Christian IV, ended up taking over the property and added his own extension known as the King's House.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely been something that like has recurringly gone through cycles of farmland, power center, and right now it's a farmland, and
My
that's very fun.
my favorite part about this hoard, though, is not only was some of the treasure locally produced, but some of it comes from the Middle East, all over Europe, and that they had their own local collection. But it just shows that the people who collect this were very well traveled and were making their way all across the
Yep.
continent.
Yeah. One thing I want to know with this, just from some of my own knowledge, is how the findings here at these two sites, how well they match with descriptions of some of the far northern people given by a Greek named Pythias of Massalia, who about 500 years prior to this longhouse reported sailing into what we understand now to be Scandinavia,
I wouldn't be
where yeah,
surprised.
where he recorded three different peoples, the Thule, the Cimmerians, and the Hyperboreans, um, all of which are just Greek names for what he was describing. Hyperborean literally means the far northerner, and I believe people think it's either Scotland or Norway that he's talking about.
It's interesting too because there's evidence to suggest that people from Sem may have actually traveled south and worked as mercenaries to the Roman Empire.
Yeah,
And that after they finished their service, they returned with goods, and others they may have bought, earned, or received as gifts.
Yeah, that was a common practice, I believe, starting around the 7th or 8th centuries, where they'd go to Constantinople and they'd work as bodyguards there or in Sicily, and then move sail up through like the Black Sea and the rivers back to Scandinavia, only to circle back around again in this like giant trade circuit.
And there is a full amount of evidence to show that there was trade between Norway and what we know as Denmark today, because we're able to see the information swap between the two groups. So it's very interesting, and you can really tell based on the amount of weapons and everything that they've located that the people in the top tier society really wanted to have power, and their target was usually Denmark.
Yep. Yeah, the a lot of the rulers in the southern fjords of what is now Denmark and Sweden were very envious of what they called Jutland, which is the peninsula for Denmark. It's the land that juts out of the rest of Europe, and they wanted it. If they controlled that, they completely controlled the sea axis between northwestern Europe and the rest of the Atlantic, and that was money.
And then the last idea that's been floated around and very fascinating is that the people who lived in these houses and had all this wealth may not have actually been the Norwegians, and that they may have actually been people from the south who made their way north and used their extensive wealth. It's the city folk moving out into the country.
Yeah, yes, the gentrification. Um, although although they would be sweeping upwards through Germany at this time, so it could also just be the Huns, because the Huns just love to cause. There's a lot of things going on in Germany. Germany is very fractured at this time, and anytime someone gets powerful in Germany or east of Germany, everyone in Germany just starts running every direction.
Well, and they believe that this could have occurred during a time of peace, where a group of warriors led by a chieftain may have traveled north to find newer hunting grounds, and they may
Yeah.
have found the land available without anyone strong leading over it. So they might have been like, ah, yes, the perfect place to start my new kingdom. Sticks a flag in the ground.
Also known as what went wrong at Vinland. It's a very Scandinavian attitude.
And this could be the justification and reasoning why they found a lot of late Iron Age swords from Rome and not much else represented from earlier periods.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Roman weapons would be prolific in Germany at this time. The Romans would have just concluded a, I want to say, 4-decade war with the along the Danube River and I believe either the Rhone or the Rhine. So there's been just decades of border wars
Border
with Germany.
Wars.
So Roman weapons would be prolific in the area.
So it poses a lot of interesting questions, and this is one of the things that I love about archaeology is you really start unraveling a story, you start unraveling a history, one that has been lost to time, but that we can slowly piece together. It's a murder mystery without so much blood and gore.
Yeah, the blood's all dried and been washed away. And now we're just left with this interconnected web of everything screwing with everything else.
And that's probably a great point for us to wrap up today's episode. Let us know what you thought down below, and we will see you in the next video.